So as we have seen briefly, there was a systematic way in which knowledge was created in the Indian intellectual tradition. But now let us see what is this thing called knowledge itself. Okay, so let us try and acquire, get familiarized with the nature of knowledge. To begin with, let us go one step behind. What is knowledge? Knowledge is a form of cognition. Okay, in Sanskrit the term for cognition is jnana, and this jnana is any apprehension, anything which reveals the object in whatever form it is. To give an analogy, just like a lamp reveals the object that is there in front of it, or reveals whatever object that is there in the room, in the same way cognition reveals or apprehends an object in some way, and knowledge is a specific kind of cognition, right? So we will see what are the various kinds of cognition, and one type of that cognition would be knowledge. Now in any episode of knowledge creation, there are some elements which are common, the three elements which are very common. First of all, there should be a seeker of knowledge. There should be someone who wants to say that I want to know this particular thing, let me apprehend this, let me cognize this, let me know this, etc. There should be some seeker of the knowledge. So that person is called pramata. In Sanskrit, that person is called pramata. That person sets out to know about something. That object about which that person wants to know is called prameya. It is the object of the knowledge. This can be a physical entity like let us say the weather pattern, or the nature of a rock, or the nature of some minerals, or the nature of the planetary motion, or it can be an internal or spiritual entity also, like mind. Let me have a knowledge of mind, let me have a knowledge of my emotion, let me have a knowledge of let us say the soul. So it can be both a physical entity as well as a non-physical entity. So the object which the pramata sets out to know is called the prameya. Now there has to be a way in which, or a method in which, this pramata examines that prameya. So what is the way in which I am going to examine let us say some distant galaxy? It is through some observation, aided by some telescopes, etc. All those things I am going to observe that telescope. So that observation is a means of knowledge. So for every different types of objects, there will be different means of knowledge. So that means of knowledge is called pramana. So when these three elements come together, you have this fantastic thing called knowledge or prama. Now in all of these things you see one word which is commonly coming, pramata, prameya, pramana, the prama that is coming commonly in all of these things. What is that prama? So as I said, jnana is the word, that is the word you can use for any cognition. Broadly, in some of the Indian philosophical traditions, any cognition you can broadly classify in two ways. Either it is a true cognition or it is a false cognition. Why do you call some cognition true? Because it apprehends the knowledge or it apprehends the object as it is. So if there is a mirror in front of me, if I apprehend the mirror, or if I cognize the mirror as it is, then it is a true cognition. But if I mistake it for some other entity, like so it is just a cardboard or something like that, if I mistake it like that, then it is a false cognition. Supposing your friend is standing over there in some distance, you cognize that person, oh that is my friend standing over there. If you cognize the object as it is, then it is a true cognition. But if you mistake your friend for somebody else, then that is a false cognition. So broadly, all cognition can be classified as true or false, right? And it is this true cognition which is called prama. The other kind of cognition is false cognition, a cognition which does not apprehend the object in its true form. This is called, that kind of cognition is called aprama, and theoreticians have tried to classify aprama also into different kinds. For example, doubt is a form of aprama. So a cognition which is of the form, is this my teacher or is it somebody else? Is that my teacher or is it somebody else? That kind of a cognition is a doubt, expresses doubt. So obviously it cannot be considered knowledge. In the same way, an erroneous cognition, like this laptop wire is running over here, because of the lighting condition or something like that, I mistake it for some snake or some worm or something like that. That is an erroneous cognition. It is called viparyaya. That is also not considered as prama or knowledge. The other kind of aprama is hypothetical reasoning, or tarka it is called. any form, any cognition which is of the form, if we had done this, then that would have happened, like that. If we had started 5 minutes ago, we would have reached the railway station on time. So any cognition of that form, which is called a subjunctive conditional, those kinds of statements are also not considered as knowledge claims. So only that cognition which apprehends the objects as it is called knowledge. So just to repeat, cognition could be true or false, and only the true cognition which apprehends the object as it is called prama. Now, in understanding this prama and this prameya and pramata, different philosophical traditions have focused their energies on different parts of this triad, pramata, prameya and pramana. In this particular chapter, our focus will be on the prameya as well as on the pramana. So two philosophical traditions are very relevant in this particular area. One is the Vaisheshika tradition and the other one is the Nyaya tradition. Just to recap, the Vaisheshika is part of the Astika Darshanas, as well then Nyaya also is part of the Astika Darshanas. It had its independent origin. It is attributed to sage Kanada. It had its own independent origin, but towards the end of the first millennia in the Common Era, it merged along with the Nyaya tradition, and it focused more on the Prameya aspect of the knowledge triangle. On the other hand, the Nyaya, which also had its own origin in the form of a school which gives the rules for debate and those kinds of things, it is also an Astika Darshana. It focused more on the Pramana side. What are the legitimate means by which I can acquire knowledge of certain entity? So this Nyaya also had a long history. Towards the 13th or 14th century, there were some very significant developments in Nyaya, because of which it got to be called Navya Nyaya. It was called the Navya Nyaya movement, and from that time onwards and a little before that, and from that time onwards particularly, this Nyaya and Vaisheshika tradition have always gone together, and today we always call them together as Nyaya Vaisheshika tradition. So now in the next parts, we will try to understand a little bit about what are the various kinds of prameyas, or what are the various legitimate objects of knowledge according to the Vaisheshika tradition, and what are the various pramanas according to the Nyaya tradition. So just to recap, what we are going to do is that in this knowledge triangle that we have over here, we are going to examine what are all the legitimate objects of inquiry, objects of knowledge, what are all the things or types of things about which we can have knowledge, which is called prameya, and what are the legitimate ways of getting knowledge about those types of things, which is called a pramana. So in the next few parts, we will try and get some acquaintance with these concepts.